Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, my guest today is Dr. Csilla Veress. She is one of the staff doctors at the TrueNorth Health Center, and today she's going to be talking about how to be resistant to stress for optimal health. Please welcome her to the show. It's nice to see you again. It's been a while.
It has been a while, and it's fabulous to see you as always. I love it. I actually look at your YouTube just to see what outfits you're wearing because I'm like, I love them.
That's so funny. Thank you. A lot of them are gifts from viewers, believe it or not, but thank you. Hey, I might be coming to True North in the next couple months just for some R, so I'll hopefully get to see you. How are things there? Probably still booked up many months in advance.
Yeah, even more so. We're hoping to launch the book soon that Alan keeps talking about. And that's really an exciting kind of adventure for him and us in general, just because it's going to be probably a next step moving forward for True North, just having people more mainstream understanding the benefits of fasting and how it can save your life potentially.
Wow. It just seems like it. Have you done it?
Yes. Water fasting.
Yeah.
I do it here.
And how long do you go for?
Usually anywhere from 5 to 7 days. I think I say this in my lectures when I started, and I think I probably mentioned this to you when we kind of started working together over a decade ago, believe it or not. But at the start of it, I didn't really think everybody needed to fast. With the new research and what we are really realizing with the world today, I do really believe that everybody in this world that can fast should be fasting, even for a short time. It doesn't have to be, long, like 21, 30 days. It can be like a good 3-day fast or even a juice cleanse, if you can't do a water only fast, obviously. So
it just sounds really hard.
it is. Yeah, it is. I always talk to people and I joke because everybody's like, you must be the best faster because you work at this place. And a little secret for everybody is that I am one of those people that needs to be not working. I am sitting most of the day and I am like, 3 to 4 out of 10 energy. So like it is, I give it up, and I have so much compassion, empathy for people who fast because it's hard for me too, for sure.
Yeah. Do you think, I've heard people say, and tell me if this is true, that water is actually easier than juice because eventually your hunger does go away?
It's very different for everybody. I have actually had many individuals that have come back and said, you know what, I don't really want to water fast anymore. I just want to juice fast because it was so much easier. Because some people actually feel like when they're on juices, it's almost like they're eating, but they're in a place where they can rest and have such a deep cleanse and have some nutrients, so I think it's very individual.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So, you always, not you always, but I've always heard this thing called autophagy. So that won't happen though in a juice fast, right?
It won't happen as much. You do get a little bit of, well, what autophagy really is that it is this, with the lower caloric load, all the way down to obviously not eating at all. What you start to do is you start to ramp up what they're called is like, your genetic, basically proteins, and you're modifying gene, function, which then tells the cells basically how to perform. So what you're doing is cells that might be a little bit too old, you're kind of pushing them into something called apoptosis, which means cell suicide, which is something that's really natural that happens. And then also we have something called lysosomes in our cells that are, I always think of them as like vacuums or cleaners in the cell. And what we do is we ramp up that ability to clean out cells. So as you can imagine, when cells work really well, or when they're clean, they work much better and they work really well. So with the juice, you're getting there. And that's actually Walter Longo's work, to be honest with you, is the fact that we are in a society that has just an overconsumption of calories on a whole, the majority of people, especially on the SAD diets. And so once we start to like really dive down into caloric deficits, we start to see more and more of that autophagy happening. But the full blown, the autophagy that was studied and won the Nobel Prize is with no calories whatsoever. So that pushes cells into it. So yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do people ever, I would imagine like that you have people that have very, very serious conditions there. And I guess when you're really, really sick, you're more motivated. But when you're basically well, it just seems like, gosh, that's kind of extreme to give up food.
It's preventative though. I mean,
Yeah.
but remember though, too, this is what I really truly believe at this day and age. And I think you probably know this as well. And your viewers probably understand this as well, just from the vast majority of doctors that you've had on your show. You know, the food is so primary in terms of how we can get people into really healthier states, but it's not everything, right? If people, I mean, I work with a ton of people that have whole food, plant-based down. I mean, they have that nailed. That's not the concern. The concern is like, are they sleeping 7 to 9 hours, right? Do they have a really good community, or do they feel alone, or are they at odds with people? Are they not realizing that they have really toxic individuals in their lives, and like very close, and even it could be even a partner or a close friend that's constantly tearing them down. What's the reason I'm even here, right, is the stress resilience course. The reason I even created that is because so many of my patients said, I love eating this way. My problem is I feel like, quote unquote, I'm an addict, or quote unquote, I can't keep maintaining this because I feel like, the food is like driving me. And one of the reasons I created it is because with all the literature we have and what we know now, actually, it could be emotional, right? It could be actually biochemical with serotonin, dopamine from long-term trauma and stressors. So that's one of the aspects. And then nowadays, our soil is actually devoid of nutrients because of what we're doing with our farming practices, right? So we're getting into really regenerative farming kind of practices with certain individuals like Zach Bush and other people who are really making this in the forefront. And then we have the chemicals, we have toxicants, we have pesticides, herbicides. So there's a lot that goes into health of the body, which brings me back to like what you said, is the fact that yes, sick, people who have a chronic illness maybe needed more, but I think all of us are in this environment that needed just as preventative, even if we're quote unquote eating healthy. So.
Right. So when somebody that's basically healthy, like let's say eats like me, comes in, do you just start you on water right away, or do you like you do juice, free feed, juice, then water?
It depends on what a person's level of comfort would be. I would say if somebody is really tentative and just really like, I don't know about this, I would probably inch them into the water, like you just said. If somebody comes and they're just like, you know what, I'm ready to go, and they're eating whole food, plant-based, and they did a really good prep with just fruits and vegetables, I would probably just let them go right into the water.
Yeah, that's
if
right.
they're safe to.
You can't go from like all the potatoes to what you got to do fruits and vegetables
Yes.
first.
Yeah, for 2 or 3 days. And then, as you know, and you've talked to Alan so many times, not everybody is safe to do a fast at every point in time in their life. So it really is, if you're going to do a fast, please talk to a doctor first to make sure that it's safe for you. But if you are safe, then, there's no, if you're not on medications, if you don't have a certain health condition that really is contraindicated for fasting, then yeah.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So tell us about this course. Like, is it self-directed? Is there interaction? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So the course is around 2 hours. If you're going to do it just start to finish, and it's divided into 2 pieces. And like I said, the reason why I created it was because I have a lot of patients that come to me and they are really trying to either stay on whole food, plant-based, or they have maybe binge eating concerns, or they have, they consider themselves quote unquote an addict, a food addict, and they have a lot of struggle just stay, or maybe I shouldn't say struggle, I'm going to say more like fears in, what to do when they come into like the real world outside of TrueNorth. So I created it for that individual. And the course basically takes someone, it is something that you can start and stop many different times. You can take notes. There is a workbook that you can actually do with it. And it just examines and explains why it's so important to be aware and conscious of stress, and the stress component of how it impacts our everything, like our emotions, our feeding structure, whether or not we can feel full, like satiation, whether or not we're hungry all the time, our cravings, how our gut microbiome functions. And we now know that there is such a big connection with the gut microbiome and our neurotransmitters, which actually drives our emotions and our feeding patterns. So that awareness piece, I think, is really, really important to help someone continue this amazing journey that they start with whole food plant-based. And so the course is really designed for that person. It's part one is just understanding why you should learn about this or why this is important. And then part two is really just diving deep into some really practical tools to be able to manage stress. So
wow, that's the key word, manage it, because it doesn't ever seem to go away, does it?
no. And that's why I called it stress resilience, is because you can't, stress is change. So anything, I mean, everybody has a different ability to, kind of deal with stress, manage stress, and even traumas, right? For some people, a singular trauma can impact someone deeper or harder than another one, depending upon whatever their genetic susceptibility is, their family life, how healthy their different systems, like their immune system, their microbiome, like I said. So it is really about the resilience piece and how to stay resilient and how to manage, on a daily basis.
Nice. Here's a question from a live viewer named Joyce in the chat. If you have certain medications that you must take daily, like for hypothyroidism, when you water fast, do you still take your daily medications or not, or daily vitamins or supplements? And what is the best water?
So yes, if you are on certain medication, like, and really the only medication that we above and beyond, can allow on a fast is thyroid medication. What we usually do, and again, I just want to state that this would be something that your physician or your attending would determine. Usually what we do is we half the dose of the thyroid, but every other medication and every other supplement would be discontinued during the fast. Another little side note I'm going to throw in there is that it is not safe sometimes to come off of every single medication for a fast, just cold turkey. For instance, SSRIs, any kind of anticonvulsants. Like, I mean, there's just benzos, there's certain classes of drugs that you will have to taper with your doctor in order to come off in a safe manner before you fast. But if you're on just even supplements, those are something that we can just get you off of right before the fast. So there's nuances. So it's not that's why I was saying it's really better to talk with a doctor and just kind of get a full assessment of whether or not it's safe for you to jump right into a fast.
Right, because you're not recommending people do this at home. You're recommending medical supervision. And
Right.
TrueNorth, you're screening the people. People don't just like show up and say, "Hey, I'm here."
Right.
They've talked to Dr. Goldhammer at length to see if they're a good candidate.
Yeah. And actually what he's even doing nowadays, because we're seeing such a increase in individuals that are really interested in fasting through the podcast that he's been doing and just kind of being in the public, he is really helping individuals figure out the right path for them. So he talks to them, and that's a free consult. And then if he really feels like there is a double down that can happen right before somebody comes in, he will schedule a consult or a coaching session with one of us, just so we can get people into a really healthier state, so that they will do better and they will actually have greater results from the fasting. Because, one of the things is, like I said, I mean, when you're walking into a fast, some people aren't always going to do amazingly well, just because fasting is hard. It's not this easy thing that you walk into, especially if you're coming in with a lot of stress, if you're coming in with a lot of medications, if you're coming in with a lot of inflammation, those kinds of things. Powerful, but it's not.
Did you answer the question about water? I can't remember now.
What water do we use? We use a distiller. So we use steam distillation. So we have a really beautiful pure water distiller. So that takes out all the impurities from it. So
nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we had somebody send in a question in advance whose birthday is in 2 days. So happy birthday.
Yay, happy birthday.
Yeah, she says, this is my birthday question. So, for Dr. Veress. And she says, her name is Laurel. She says, I've been whole food plant-based and SOS free for more than a dozen years, but my blood pressure has remained high even after a fasted TrueNorth. Plus, in the last 3 years, I'm now hypothyroid. I'm a 65-year-old woman, have had high blood pressure since 25 and have been medicated since 31. I want to get off my blood pressure and hypothyroid meds, but I can't seem to get my numbers to budge. Do you have any suggestions?
A lot of things. I mean, again, it goes back to like what I kind of started off with, is that first thing I always do is look at foundations of health. So, it's great and awesome job on being whole food, plant-based, SOS free, and great job on doing a water fast. But what I would examine is, what is your sleep pattern? So there's a lot of study that has been done. If you're not sleeping 7 to 9 hours throughout the night, and if you're not sleeping distinctly, through the night, that many hours, you can have higher levels of blood pressure. So that is one thing that's been studied, especially with sleep apnea type of studies. That's another thing, if you do feel like you snore or your partner tells you snore, I would do like a sleep study just to figure that out. The other thing is stress. So that can come from many different areas. Remember, stress, when cortisol is released in the body, right? One of the things it does is it causes vasoconstriction, which means your arteries start to really shrink in size. And so there's a lot of force when your heart pushes that blood through that rises your blood pressure. So that's one other thing to really focus in on. And if there is like just a regular level of stress, then, kind of diving in deep. If you were in my office, I would probably kind of go through a series of questions like, do you know if you've had like a water damaged building in your history that you lived in or you worked in, or what kind of environment that you, find yourself in? Like, is there a higher level of some sort of environmental toxin? Has there been mold in your environment? Because those things can actually bring up your blood pressure. There's a lot of study on nitric oxide. So one of the things that I would do is test your nitric oxide levels, because there's a huge actually, even in the conventional world, believe it or not, they're looking at cardiovascular inflammation, and it's linked to nitric oxide deficiency. So that's another aspect I would look into. So there's a couple things. I mean, it really would be looking into some of, or let me say it this way, overturning some of the rocks that maybe haven't been looked under, with just maybe focusing just deeply on the whole food plant-based, which is important, but it's not everything.
Nice. And she also wanted to know, is there a trustworthy test to test for iodine deficiencies?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do a 24-hour iodine urine catch. So those are the most kind of sensitive and specific tests. So LabCorp, I know Quest does it too. Your doctor just has to order it, and then you get this beautiful big orange tub that you're just going to pee in for 24 hours. And that gives you basically a tissue, value throughout the day.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Beth says, has anyone ever tested negative after fasting for viruses which are not supposed to go away?
We have had some individuals, but the question has always been about the validity of the testing done. There are some, we have definitely seen, I will say this, because with fasting and with improving all different functions now that we know, like if you are resetting the microbiome, like I said, fasting is also very parasympathetic. So you're in a very good resting state. So when you're resting and you're in the parasympathetic, your immune system is going to be boosted, right? You're going to be actually having a better immune function with that sort of nervous system kind of regulation. In addition to that, fasting in and of itself kind of helps to regulate not only inflammation, but your immune system. So with all of that, we have seen titers go down. So we have seen, like, I've seen EBV antibodies like kind of go down. I've seen like even like immune function, like for thyroid antibodies go down. So we have, or herpes, herpes simplex 1 and 2, we've actually seen them go down. So when we see those actually start to improve, the thought is that we are actually either helping the body really regulate that immune system kind of response to those viruses, but it's not something that I would say I see consistently for sure.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. Here's a question from Jesse. If you're a long time SOS-free person, whole food plant-based, doing a water fast, but you've also had GERD for a long time and experienced painful heartburn during the water fast, how do you handle that?
Well, one of the things I would do is actually examine and find out why you have GERD. So somebody who is still having GERD, if they're whole food plant-based, SOS-free, there's something causing the GERD. And so it could be something you're eating, even though, quote unquote, it's in the whole category of whole food plant-based. So for instance, sometimes tomatoes, which are delicious and awesome, are just maybe too, or they cause reactions in individuals that are maybe more sensitive to it. So that's one thing I would look at. H. pylori is another thing that I would look into. I would also look into microbiome assessments. I would look into stomach acid to see if you're even producing enough stomach acid, which I know sounds counterintuitive. But what happens is that many people in this day and age, because our digestive function is so diminished, our stomachs actually have to work overtime in order to produce that acidity to break down all the foods. So actually we have more hyperchlorhydria, which is like low stomach acid, which causes the acid reflux to happen. So there's a lot of reasons why. That's what I would look into first and foremost. Like, you shouldn't be living with acid reflux for the rest of your life. There's a reason. And then one thing that is only really diagnosed when you do an endoscopy, which is like a camera down the throat, is figuring out if you have a hiatal hernia. If you do have a hiatal hernia and you ever come to TrueNorth, Dr. Goldhammer has an amazing adjustment that I will say is 100% effective for that. It's not fun, but it's definitely effective. So
I love that. Not fun. That's probably why he likes it so much, because it's not fun. Right.
Exactly.
Have you seen inflammatory arthritis improve but not be able to heal completely at TrueNorth?
Like rheumatoid arthritis or osteoarthritis?
She's calling it inflammatory. So maybe you could address both.
Yeah. So what I will say is this: we definitely, for both, whether or not it's rheumatoid arthritis or some sort of autoimmune type of pain patterns, or if it is osteoarthritis, which is much more like just inflammation in the joints that wears it down, both of them do respond really well. And we have actually seen some cases go right into remission for both of them. It depends. Just like anything, it depends on the individual. It depends on how many medications you've been on. It depends upon how much stress is in your life, what kind of other inflammatory conditions are going on in the person's body. Whether or not in osteoarthritis, one of the concerns obviously is how extreme is it? Like, are you having bone on bone? What kind of therapies you've tried prior to. So it's a little bit individual. I will say that most people do see benefits for sure, but whether or not it goes into like full remission is really independent upon the person.
Nice. And the thing is whatever you do at TrueNorth, you got to continue afterwards.
For sure. Yeah.
That's what do you see that a lot with? I mean, it's human nature, to.
For sure. Well, that's to be 100% honest. AJ, like the reason why I did the course is because I have had, in the 10 years I've been there, as you can imagine, I've seen thousands of patients. So what I have seen is that people come and they really want, the fast to be the end all be all. But as health is in a continuum. So either you're driving yourself towards chronic illness or you're driving yourself towards optimal health. And the beautiful thing about doing whole food plant-based, SOS free, or doing this really amazing health journey with leading with nutrition, is that you're constantly working your way towards optimal health. But then there's other pieces that need to be worked in order to sustain that. And when people come and they do a fast, they go back into the world, and the real world, there is stressors. There are husbands, wives, kids, family members, friends. There is the world. We live in a very artificially kind of stimulated world with, processed foods. You go into a restaurant, it's really easy. It's really easy to go off the plan, or really hard to like kind of stay on it. We are around like cell phones and computers constantly. We're lacking intimate connections, things of that nature, which all drive these, kind of imbalances, cortisol dysfunctions, like our adrenal dysfunctions, and dopamine, serotonin, which drive cravings, which drives us to, eat, make poor choices, which drives cravings, all of that stuff. So just going back to what you said, it really is important to understand that the fast is a very small piece of your life. And it really is important to do something when you're out of True North in order to sustain that. And that's where like something like the course comes into play, or, getting in with like groups like yours, like a membership program where you have a really strong community, and you're constantly like built up by other people that, want to live a healthy life, or you make drastic changes in your life, right? You really make those decisions. Like, I mean, how many people have I talked to that said, I really thought I could have like a glass of wine here and there, or I thought I could do, X, Y, and Z. And what I'm realizing at my third or my fourth time at True North is that I really have to change my social group. I have to change how I'm viewing, after I leave here, in order to really kind of sustain that health. Because once you feel healthy, once you know what healthy feels like, nothing else tastes as good, right? Or nothing, or whatever that saying is, I forget.
Nothing tastes as good as health feels.
Healthy feels, that's right. Gregor, I think, said that, and I love that saying. I do.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Dina asks, is potato a vegetable or a tuber?
I consider it a vegetable, but I mean, there's different classifications of vegetables for sure, but it's definitely a vegetable. Yeah.
It's a starchy vegetable.
It's a starch. Yeah. Just like sweet potato.
Nice. Mona says she clicked the link to your course, but there's no date and time. That's because it's evergreen, right? I mean,
it is evergreen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I did that specifically because I want people to get in there whenever they need it, go back to it, stop it if you need to. I mean, it's 2 hours. The first half is an hour. The second half is an hour. And there's a lot of data in there. Like I really wanted people to immerse themselves in this information and in the science so that you understand why it's important. And I do, from the feedback that I've gotten from the people that have done the course, they really do feel like it's given them another kind of tool in their toolbox to keep going forward and maintaining this healthy journey that they're on. So
nice.
Yeah.
All right. See, I saw a question about hydrogenated water and a mineral supplement such as LMNT. I don't know what that is, but do you recommend a 3-day fast using hydrogenated water and LMNT?
I don't think you need to. Many people, what they always are concerned about is what is going to happen with your electrolytes when you do a water fast. And remember that your body is gosh, it is so intelligent, and it has a self-healing mechanism. And so it will do everything it can in order to regulate all the physiological functions during a fast. Most people, I know it's hard to believe this, but most people do not need a single change to their electrolytes when they're doing a water fast, anywhere from 21-day water fast, 30-day water fast. I've even seen many people go through 40-day water fast without needing any electrolytes. So what's really important, and this is what Chef AJ already mentioned, is that if you're going to undertake something like that, please, please make sure that, number one, you're safe to do it. Number two, you've had blood work that shows that you're safe to do it, and there's no concerns or no red flags, and you're not on medications, all this other concerns, because those are the things that could absolutely then change the course of fasting once you're in there. So.
Okay, thanks. Mona says, when she says it, I think she must mean the course, explain my sleep score. She did a sleep study.
The course probably won't go deep into the sleep score. That's another course that I'm actually doing. So stay tuned, because I'm actually going to do all the foundations of health just to really help cinch up what we really teach at TrueNorth, right? So as most people know, we're under like the hygiene movement, and the hygiene movement really says that there's different factors that people need to make sure that are in their life in order to be healthy. And so sleep is definitely one of them. But the course is really designed for you to understand stress and change in your life and how it can affect you and how traumas affect you, right? For instance, I know that you're in Sacramento, you're in California now too.
Yep, Northern California.
I'm in Northern California too. We've been affected by fires. How would that affect, your ability to stay healthy? What are the things that you have to do in order to kind of stay consistent with all your health goals, things like that. So, but the next course is going to be definitely with sleep, and we'll go deeper with that.
Hey, are you on your lunch hour now?
Yes.
Oh no. Well, tell me anytime you need to stop, because you need to get some delicious food. That's a perk about working there, huh? You get your meals made for you.
I love it. I love it. Well, you know what though? I will say this, I do more intermittent fasting, so I'm doing just fine. I usually have like a really late breakfast, early lunch kind of deal. So I'm totally.
That's funny, because I was going to ask you about that, because we keep hearing so much about intermittent fasting, and I have a lot of doctors on the show that are Seventh-day Adventists, and they do it, but they do breakfast and lunch, and they're telling me, and they keep, because my primary doctor up here is Seventh-day Adventist, and he doesn't dinner, and they all say, no, it's much better to just do breakfast and lunch, circadian rhythms. I mean, it may be better, but it's much more difficult, especially if you have a family or want to socialize. But what do you know about intermittent fasting, and does it really matter if it's lunch, dinner, breakfast, lunch,
It definitely can. When you look at intermittent fasting studies, what's really exciting, and I think this is really great for your viewers to know, I just went to a conference 2 weeks ago in Florida, and it was an international conference. It was everybody from MDs, DOs, NPs, PAs, all the titles out there for the medical world. And the exciting thing was that everybody was talking about intermittent fasting. And the reason why that's exciting is because this is really not only part of a smaller niche of doctors that are listening or like going into this type of research, but it's actually really moving into the conventional world. And one of the things that they will talk about time and time again is really time restricted feeding. And so when you look at that, it's really important just to have your feeding window in a more truncated period of time. What studies do show is that as long as you are doing at least 12 hours from the time you eat dinner to the next meal, that is baseline. That should be across the board. Every single human in the entire world should be at least trying to do that, because that's the safest, model. That's the number one best thing. When you keep moving kind of down the line, when you're trying to do 14 or 16 hours, where you're actually even shortening the feeding window, so you're restricting it, that can be even more powerful. But it depends upon what your goals are. are. So I always say to patients, what can you do? Like, are you more of a breakfast person? Or are you more of a dinner person? If you are more of a breakfast person, then eat breakfast and lunch and skip dinner. For some people, dinner is the only time that they're going to be with their families and they're going to have that time together. So skipping breakfast is actually easier than, doing a dinner, than skipping dinner. But what studies do show is that, especially with diabetes type 2, insulin resistance, some of the metabolic syndrome type of cases, it does benefit in order to skip dinner so that you are following the circadian pattern. So if that is something that works for you, following, and that also follows your diurnal insulin and cortisol drives as well. So there is a lot of studies in that. I skip breakfast just because I've never in my life been a breakfast person.
Me neither. And that's why I can't see how this will change. And they say, well, don't eat dinner. Well, I don't eat dinner and I still don't get hungry for breakfast. So I don't get it.
Yeah. I say the real science. And when you look at all the literature, if anybody wants more information, go to PubMed or go to Google Scholar, which are the two sites that really help you kind of dive into the research. Every single research study kind of ends off with just saying, when you are doing more of a restricted feeding window, you are winning. There is a point where you can have too much fasting. And that's when, if you're burning a lot of calories during the day because you're exercising, you're working, you're doing a lot, then, doing maybe one meal a day might be just too little, because number one, not only are you not getting enough calories to satisfy hormonal functions and physiological function, but also you definitely at that point in time might not even be getting the nutrient load that your body needs in order to function appropriately. So it's that Goldilocks effect, right? Like, you want to really make sure that you're paying attention to how much nutrients and calories you're getting per day. I wouldn't say go crazy with it, but like, just make sure that you're getting at least like 2 meals a day in there, but in a shortened feeding window.
Right. Because these people that do OMAD, 1 meal a day, it seems like it would basically be a binge, because how can you get all the calories you need in one meal?
It is. Yeah, it is. And I joke about it, but actually it's like half joking, because there is truth to it. If you really are thinking about doing 1 meal a day, first of all, it would be really difficult because of the nutrient load, and you would have to really pay mind to like making sure you get so much of the rainbow in that one meal. But you would really have to be a monk, or a nun, where all you are doing is really maybe, very light activity. Maybe you're praying or meditating, for hours a day. So it doesn't really function well for a normal human that's dealing with the stressors of the world.
It's funny because you talked about do what you can do. And to me, like, if I were to do the intermittent fasting the way the Adventist doctors want me to, or the way they do it, and they think it's just the greatest thing, it would cause so much stress that it would undo any effects of intermittent fasting.
Yeah. And that's where people, what I always recommend is we have to tailor, our recommendations for healthy, not only diets, right, lifestyle changes, all of that, to the individual, because it's not a one size fits all. It's really going to be like what a person can do with, the life that they have or their environment. So I agree with that. Yeah.
Right. Judith says, can we do this course on our own without joining the class? I don't think it actually is a class. I think it's like a program that you do at your own pace.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people decide to do it after their fast at TrueNorth, just so that they can get a reset entirely. And for anybody that's ever done a water fast at TrueNorth, one of the things that people do always say is that you're not only just fasting from food, you also are taking yourself out of your natural environment. So it helps you to really kind of really reset the mind and the soul as well, so that you're going back into the world almost like a new person, like you really have gone deep into just kind of working through any old stuck baggage that there is. And so that's where the course can also just heighten that experience, because of the fact that you're now there's an explanation, and there is tools that you can use once you've done that when you go back into the world. Just like, you can use Chef AJ's program or things of that nature if you need tools of how to stay close to whole food plant-based SOS. This is like another tool in your toolbox to help you manage some of the stressors that might hit you as you come out of the fast. But you do not need to be fasting first in order to do the course. So it's really designed for anybody.
Right. Sylvia says, why would a person do a 30 to 40 day water fast? That sounds really intense.
That is intense. Of course, as you can imagine, you definitely need to have the reserves in order to do that long of a fast, number one. Number two is that a lot of times individuals that are deciding to do that long of a fast, or if we are approving that length of a fast, it's usually a pretty chronic type of illness or a chronic inflammatory state that requires or that is calling for more time in that fasting zone. So sometimes what happens is people just have that much time in order to dedicate to their health. And so they really make that kind of goal in order to do that length of time. And then other times people are doing so well. I mean, there's so many times people come, it's getting a little harder just because we are getting so much more individuals coming to TrueNorth. But sometimes when people are here, they're thinking they're only going to do a 14-day fast, but they are doing so well. Their vitals are normal. They are really loving the stay and they want to keep going because they see the benefits, or they're seeing pain reduction. They're seeing digestion improve, all of that stuff. So they want to keep going. And so then we do a day by day, right? We're always assessing every single day to see, are you safe to keep going? And some people end up with 30 to 40 days and there is a benefit sometimes. So.
God bless them. That doesn't
sound. I know.
Okay. So
I agree. And I work here. So,
yeah. But that's not most people aren't fasting 40 days. Not most, right?
Average, I would say, no, not 40 days for sure. Average, I would say, is anywhere from 14 to 25.
Wow, that's still long.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of answered this, but she might have tuned in late. This is Sylvia says, if I wanted to do a water fast and wanted to do this at home, that's the first thing. Nobody recommends that, I believe. She's whole food plant-based, but on a low dose of antidepressants, any guideline? Because she said that you cannot fast on antidepressants.
Yeah. First thing I would do is definitely, if you are interested in fasting for you, I would not do it at home because you can't do it on medications. But also with antidepressants, those are the class of medications that you really need to work with your doctor in order to taper off if you're safe to taper off of them. And then once you're tapered off of them or you're able to come off of them, that's when I would probably contact Dr. Goldhammer or TrueNorth and figure out a time when you can come in here and do a supervised fast. I would not recommend for someone who is coming off medications like that. I would not recommend doing it at home. There's so many different nuances that can come up with getting off medications that you've been on long-term. So.
Right. Thank you. Kathy says, does your course, and by the way, the course, we have links in the chat in the show notes, so check it out. It's on stress resilience and optimal health. Does it cover the pleasure trap and or how to avoid processed foods if addicted to food?
So yes and no. So I definitely go deep into talking about the pleasure trap, and I definitely go into the beautiful power of whole food plant-based to help sustain kind of foundations of health and healthy, like even stress resilience, because when you're eating right, you're able to manage your stressors much better. But actually, I love the fact that you asked this question, is because the point of the course is for someone who considers themselves maybe a food addict or has maybe binging concerns, to help you understand that some of those drives in order to want, let's say, processed food, or to want refined carbohydrates, or to want the pleasure trap, is really not necessarily maybe in this kind of addictive from birth type of concern. It's more of a neurotransmitter imbalance that has come from more stressor type situations. So the idea is that if you have tools in your toolbox to manage stressors when they hit, your ability to stay online with the diet or with the whole food plant-based, no salt, no sugar, no oil, is going to be much of an easier pathway. So remember, because stress can cause a lot of cortisol, and even like trauma early on can cause a lot of cortisol disruption. And what we are finding is in children that have actually like a lot of stress, even growing up, your ability to produce serotonin and dopamine actually is dysfunctional. And so what happens is as you can imagine, when you're trying to soothe yourself or when you're seeking pleasurable pathways, you're going to have so many more, right, imbalances with those serotonin and dopamine, which is why you're seeking out things that drive them, right? Like high sugar foods, like some people with alcohol, like some people with, different types of drugs like heroin, cocaine. But if you even study, Gabor Mate's work, he worked with some of the most severe addicts in Vancouver. And what he said was that underneath every single addiction is always some sort of an emotional kind of unraveling that needs to happen, or some sort of really deep trauma. And when you work deeply there, you are actually then unraveling the addiction piece or the addictive qualities. So that's the point of the whole course. The whole course is to give you another tool in your toolbox so that you don't have to turn to like SOS type of foods. You don't have to turn to processed foods because your body doesn't want that. Your body actually wants self-soothing. Your body wants pleasure, but you can find it in other ways because of the fact that you're managing and you have that stress resilience. So hopefully I answered that question.
Yeah, thank you. Somebody named Shachi, I think, is asking, what about Dr. Stacy Sims' research that says women athletes shouldn't do intermittent fasting and should not work out fasted? And what about women going through perimenopause?
Great questions. Yeah. So it goes back to what I was mentioning before, is that there is definitely different kind of levels of intermittent fasting and time restrictive feeding windows. And it's a little bit different for every person. For perimenopause, I would say that there is actually quite a bit of research that shows that 12 to 14 hours can be very beneficial, and that can help with hormone regulation during that time period. One of the best things you can do, though, and if you're watching Chef AJ's program, you're probably there already, but giving up meat, giving up dairy, giving up, those highly processed foods are number one. And that can actually help with hot flashes, night sweating, things of that nature that you get when you go through that menopausal state. But intermittent fasting is still safe for those individuals. Even during your menstrual cycle, there are times where fasting is actually more indicated than other times. For menstruating women, for instance, doing it in the first 14 days, so before ovulation, is going to be a little bit more advantageous than in your progesterone type of cycle or your luteal cycle, which is the last 14 days of the cycle. Your last 14 days of the cycle is really a time for rest. It's a really time for inward kind of focus. And so during that time, we don't recommend as much intermittent fasting. So there is definitely different times. And with athletes, it goes back to what I mentioned, even with the 1 meal a day. Those individuals need a higher caloric load because of the fact that they are kind of outputting so much calories because of the exercise that they're doing. So those are individuals that probably won't do, a 16 or 18-hour fast. But even those individuals, believe it or not, can really benefit from a 12-hour fast. So just from the time that they have dinner to the time that they wake up, that 12-hour, just the basic fasting window. And that's still an intermittent fast, which is interesting, but they would probably be doing multiple meals in between, that or during their feeding window. It is.
Nice. So Linda, who's watching live, is a nurse. And where did your question go? about that? Oh, she's an LPN, and she's about to start a shift that's, I guess it's 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 1 hour drive each way to and from work. What is the best way to eat regarding fasting? Also, she doesn't sleep well. I don't think anybody that works at night really sleeps well, because you're supposed to sleep at night, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I would just say, and I know that sometimes this is not possible, but I would really push to see if you can get more normal time. So, and I say that just because as a doctor, I feel like sometimes I just have to kind of say the foundational piece in there. So if it is any way possible for you to get to a normal schedule, that's number one. Number two is, you might already know this, but one of the best ways that sleep studies have shown to be to benefit individuals with night shift work is that make sure that you try to bunch together your night work as much as you can, because I know that sometimes you have different types of breaks, like you can be 10 hours or 3 days on, or like 4 days off, things like that. Bunch it together as much as you can. And on the days that you are then actually not working, make sure you go back to your normal circadian pattern. That has been shown to be the most beneficial, not only for your circadian pattern, for general health, because what sleep studies are showing is that independent of anything else, just because your circadian pattern is flipped, you have a higher likelihood, or there is a higher likelihood of high blood pressure, of insulin resistance, things of that nature. So working on those pieces is going to be the most powerful for you. And what I would really do, because I think you're asking the question because you already probably know this, which is awesome, but the thing about those night shifts is the more that you are kind of following a normal pattern, the better. And why I say that is because then if you have an hour drive, actually trying to eat before your shift, right? I don't love somebody eating in the car because you're not really mindful of what you're eating. So right before you go, I would then eat, because then you're setting yourself up for success, because then you have that 12-hour fast. I would not eat during your shift. Bring teas, bring a lot of water. You can potentially do juices if you really get like nutrient deficient, or even broth. Sometimes what I'll do with some of my night shift workers is have them bring like just a really beautiful veggie broth that they make. So you get some electrolytes, and it also feels a little bit filling, but it's not necessarily like a lot of calories. So you can stay in at least that circadian patterning with your food being one of the drivers. And then what you do is when you go home, if you want to have something to eat, then you can have something to eat as well. So that it's almost like your breakfast is going to be when most people's dinners are, and your dinner is going to be when most people's breakfasts are. But definitely get back into a normal patterning once you're off of your work. So that's where the studies have been showing the most benefit.
That's interesting, because I thought I would have thought should just stay on whatever schedule they are all the time.
I would too, but the studies are showing actually the more that it's actually the more somebody is against daylight. So one of the biggest drivers of our circadian patterning in our suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is this little kind of pea-like nucleus that's in our hypothalamus. It's basically daylight and nighttime. So anytime you're getting signals from the outside world, that's signaling and driving this beautiful internal clock that we have. So the more you're staying abnormal or outside of what is in our environment, the more unhealthy it is. So anytime you can start to revert back to what's going on, you're going to start to create more and more health. So.
Okay, thank you. So Dina wants to know, is water alkaline?
Is water alkaline?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I believe that it is. I don't know what the pH of it is, and I think that it probably would depend upon what water you're talking about. So, meaning if you're taking it out of the tap, depending upon whether or not there's like chlorine, fluoride, some other chemicals in there, it might not be, let's say, as alkaline.
Maybe is distilled water alkaline? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's distilled water alkaline. Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that word.
So distilled water is alkaline. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And if a fast puts a person in an underweight situation, should that person ideally stay until they reach their ideal weight to avoid overeating once they get home in their own environment?
No, not necessarily. Like stay at TrueNorth is what she's
Yeah,
asking. No,
yeah.
no, not necessarily. No, most people, once they start to do the refeeding, the program that we have in place allows a person post fast to get to a place where they stabilize and they are safe to go back home. Some people will decide to stay just because they want to enjoy the food and they want to enjoy the support and the community. But you don't have to, because it's set up in a way, if you're following the program to the T, it's really meant to help the person stabilize and get back into normal, kind of feeding status once they're at home. So, and actually, if you go underweight and we want you to gain weight, a lot of times, that is eating a little bit more caloric dense foods, or just changing up whole food, plant-based type of meals, where maybe that person, they're going to have a lot of greens, but they're going to have maybe more beans, right? Or they're going to maybe have one or two more sweet potatoes, or something to that effect, where, you can kind of change it up so that we can help them gain weight back to normal weight levels.
Perfect. Thanks. I think we have time for a couple more questions. One of them is, can a colon flush be done safely in combination with a water fast? I don't think a colon flush can never be done safely, according to you guys.
Yeah, well, we don't do, I'm thinking what they're meaning is a colonic. So in certain individuals that really do have problems with constipation, as you can imagine, we don't want anything like putrefying or getting stuck in the colon once they're doing the water fast, because you're not going to have bowel movements in a water fast. But one of the points and why we ask you to do fruits and vegetables prior to the fast is that it actually creates a high fiber content and lots of hydration. So you're moving stool out of the colon and you just have those beautiful plant fibers that are in there. If somebody is really constipated, we might have them do like an enema or maybe a colonic prior to, but it would be dangerous for somebody to do a colonic or an enema or a smooth move tea or whatever you're using in order to, push the bowels in a water fast, because you can actually, that's a great way to disrupt your electrolyte balance. So,
Yeah, thank you. I saw a question from Beth. Where did it go? Come on, here we go. Are flax or chia seeds sufficient for daily fats, or should we include other nuts, seeds, or avocado? And what kind of nuts and seeds are allowed at TrueNorth?
We allow in TrueNorth every nut and seed. We don't usually have peanuts, I don't think.
Goldhammer doesn't like peanuts at all.
I don't think I've ever seen anything that has that, but every other nut and seed we definitely do allow. This is because a lot of my work is in microbiome, just so your viewers know. When you look at that literature, the beauty of it is that even docs that believe in ketogenic or paleo, the one thing they keep saying over and over is plant-based food is by far king, when you're trying to get your microbiome or optimal health back in place. How they kind of go into paleo and keto, I'm not really sure. The studies don't even support it. But anyway, the reason I say that is because the more rainbow type foods and the more biodiverse your diet is, the healthier microbiome is going to be. And then that is going to equal greater optimal health across the board, every system in the body. So when I think about nuts and seeds, I say, get as much variety as you can. So if you can have, like, let's say hazelnuts one day, almonds, then walnuts, then pecans, limit them, right? Because they're going to be a higher caloric density food and we don't want too much in your diet on a daily basis, but definitely get as much variety as you can. But pay attention though. Sometimes some people can't do every single nut or seed out there. So really pay attention to what's, doable for you.
Great. Thank you. So Karen said she got the course. Congratulations, Karen.
Hey!
We'll get it as well. And if people want to follow you or get in touch with you or have a private consult with you, how do they do that?
So I provided a couple of links. So if you want to just kind of follow me a little bit, I provided my Instagram link, which I get to post just some of my fun adventures or things that I hope will motivate and inspire individuals. You can absolutely do a phone coaching consult with me. That is a link that I also provided. That's through TrueNorth. So if the link maybe isn't working, all you have to do is go to TrueNorth's website. And I'm actually on top of the screen, and you could just click it. It says phone coaching. And there's a lot of us doctors that are doing it. So even if I'm maybe busy, there's other doctors that are just fabulous. And then of course, if you come to TrueNorth, even if I don't get to see you as me being your attending for a water fast, I have a lot of patients coming to me for consults, just above and beyond, what they're doing at TrueNorth. So yeah.
Okay. Last question real quick. Is it okay to do a water fast with spring water?
It is. It's definitely okay. The reason we do more distilled water is because the way we look at it is we really want to make sure that all you're doing in this beautiful state is to kind of allow the body to heal at the deepest level. And so, as you can imagine with spring water, sometimes not every spring water is really as clean as it is. And a lot of times they have this mineral, but they don't have that mineral. And so there's so much variance. Those little things can sometimes shift or change the course of a fast. So it's not that it's necessarily dangerous. It's just more of you're adding in a variable. And with distilled water, that variable is not there.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you. This was a lot of fun. It was great catching up with you.
Oh, you too. Always. It's really great to see you.
Thank you, Dr. Veress. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow when Dr. Nikki Davis is going to be giving a wonderful presentation on